Hi everyone, this should be your first video for factoring techniques, which is factoring using the GCF. This is one of the techniques that you always want to do before every single problem is to see if you can take out a GCF. So here we go. Okay, so this technique is the GCF technique. This should be used before all problems, but let's talk about what GCF is first. It's your greatest common factor. So greatest common, hopefully you know this, but greatest common factor. So it's basically saying if I could break up these values, what's the most that they have in common? So when I'm looking here, I can see that in my example up top, they all have a 2 in common, right? That's the most. So you could take a 2 out. When you look at the variables here, you can see that not every term has an x, so we cannot take an x out, but every term does have at least one y to give, so you can take a y out. When you're talking about factoring out the GCF, you can think of it almost like dividing, okay? So let's do an example down here. If I were to have 7x cubed minus 35x. All right, so here's an example that we can think about our GCF. When we're thinking about dividing, we want it to be able to be divided equally, evenly. So when we take out, we can take out a 7. That's the most that these two numbers have in common for just the coefficients. I'm going to leave a little more space there. So when I take a 7 out, you can think of it like dividing, right? So if I divide 7 by 7, I end up with a 1. If I divide 35 by 7, I'm going to end up with a 5. Now let's look at our x's, and we'll do those in between steps in a second. When you look at our x's, this x cubed is telling us that you can take up to 3 x's out of this term. This x right here technically has an exponent of 1. That's telling me I can only take up to 1 x out of this term. So you have to think about what is the most that they have in common. And that would actually just be 1x. So I'm going to bring a 7x to the front. Now thinking about the in-between steps, think of it like dividing. So this is really going to be like 7x cubed divided by 7x. When I reduce that down, the 7's become 1, x cubed divided by x. Or just think of it like you're taking 1 out, you're going to be left with x squared. And then when I look, I have negative 35x, and I'm going to do the same thing where I'm doing 35x divided by 7x. This is a method that you don't need to do, but it really helps you see how it simplifies. Now I know 35 divided by 7 is 5, and x divided by x, it goes away, it's just 1. So this would be our whole solution, where you take the GCF and you put it in the front. Just because you take it out does not mean it goes away. It always gets placed in the front. It's still part of the problem. Okay, so it's still important to have. All right, let's do one more example before we write this note down and end this video. So let's do something a little trickier. We'll do a couple more terms. So let's do something a little more complicated here. So we're going to see a couple more terms. Let's make it just bigger for us. All right, so let's do this one. So let's do negative 24 a squared b squared plus 36 AB minus 60A. So again, we're still using this GCF concept. When I'm looking, I can see that these are definitely all even numbers. So I know they're at least divisible by 2, but let's think about numbers bigger than that. So to do that, you can factor these numbers in any way you'd like. This is just the way I'm going to do it. So we have 24, the factors of 24. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, let's see, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. Then we can do factors of 36. When we break up 36, we have 1 and 36, 2 and 18, let's see, we have 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. And then we also have 60, so we're going to factor 60. 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, let's see, we have 4 and 15, 5 and 12, 6 and 10, and that's it. So we just want to go through and basically consider these like lists of numbers, and we want to figure out which common factor is the greatest. So looking through, you should be easy to spot that. I didn't mean to highlight the 2 there, but 12 is the greatest common factor. So we can pull a 12 out to the front. Now you do want to be careful with the signs. Just stay consistent. I grade everything manually, so don't worry if you get something slightly different than somebody else. As long as your work is correct for your answer, then you're all right. So let's use 12 as our GCF. We can pull a 12 out to the front. I am going to leave a little bit of space because hopefully I can pull something else out. And let's just think what's left over when we take a 12 out of these values. If you did the factoring like I did, it should be pretty easy for you to see what's going to be left when you basically divide this 12 out. So when we divide 12 from negative 24, we're going to get a negative 2. Forget about the a squareds, b squareds right now. We're just working with numbers. Leave some space. Now we have 36. When we factor 12 out, we're left with 3. Leave some space. It's going to be positive. And then our last one, leave some space. It is going to be negative. When we factor 12 out of negative 60, you're going to be left with a 5. Leave a little bit of space. Now let's deal with our variables. So looking at an a's, our first term has 2 a's to give. 1a and 1a. So that means that the most I can take from all 3 will just be an a. So I have an a on the outside, and let's go through and write what would be left over. So if I'm taking an a out of an a squared, I'm going to be left with an a. If I'm taking an a out of an ab, I'm not going to have any more a's. If I'm taking an a out of an a, I'm not going to be left with any more a's. So my a's are done. And now we can look at our b values. So with b's, remember every term has to have it. So we have 2 b's, 1 b, no b's. So the fact that this term does not have any b's means that I cannot take them out of any of the terms. So 12a is our GCF. Now we just need to make sure that we write all of our terms in our final answer. So we're going to be left with a b squared, with a b, and no b. So this is a little spaced out if you'd like to see a little bit cleaner. It's 12a, negative 2ab squared, plus 3b minus 5. Put a box around it, circle it, highlight it, but that is your final answer.